Good afternoon. I think we have a really spectacular speakers today, along with CEOs and partners and our teams that are assembled here from around the world. The data is it's not a tangible thing. It's hard to morph in your hand. It is a concept. It's somewhat abstract. So one of the things I'm trying to do is, how does data look like? So one of the things I want to communicate is starting with size of the data. And start with that, let me ask you, how many stars are in galaxy? Not Samsung phones, but galaxy. So anybody has any questions, comments? Billion? 10 billion? It is 100 billion. 100 billion stars are what's in our universe. And that number looks gigantic, but if you think about what's in our brain, if you think about our neurons, it's also 100 billion neurons that are running and processing information at a much less power, at a 20 watt, my understanding is, and that is very efficient compute that are running our system. And then if you look at what's possible with all the IP addresses that are out there, 340 trillion IP addresses. And I was thinking, how do you call that this number? And I was trying to understand the taxonomy of the numbers. So I look at the table on this. It turned out it's not defined yet. 10 to 36 is still question mark. So here's an opportunity for you to volunteer your suggestions to create a name for this byte information. But the point, I think, is that there is a very big potential for data that are out there, because we all know when you're given IP address, the data is going to be put together, it's going to be connected, it's going to be probably shared and stored, and that information is only going to grow. In fact, we tried to tabulate the data, and you can really see the gigantic amount of data that's exploding. So that's not surprising to you, but the fact is that much of this data is still not analyzed. Only 3% is tagged. Only 0.5% is analyzed. So there is tremendous opportunity to do something with the data that are coming, and the data is only going to increase. In fact, in a way, Samsung is a data company. We don't make any money out of data, but we actually make a lot of money storing, transferring, and providing access to the data. As the largest memory company, clearly it shows the reflection in our business. As the more data is consumed, more SSDs are needed, more DRAM is required, and of course, more network compute are going to require even more acceleration of this consumption. So that has been a really good boom that we didn't really anticipate as much as we should have. So this has been a real upside. In fact, there has been a shortage of memory because of this explosion of data that are creating more demand for memories. So I was trying to think 160 zettabytes, how does it look like? Again, it's data, and these things are very difficult to shape in your hand. And it turned out it's about 2.5 billion hours of 4K Ultra HD content. Or if you put, assuming each phone of Galaxy 8 has 128 gigabytes of memory, it turned out it means 12 trillion phones stacked up, which is a pretty high stack. I think it can go up to the moon. And so it's incredible what one can do with so much data, but that's what the implication is. The other implication really is about data does have value at different time, just like any other opportunities for products, and there is a window. And data, just like sushi, when they are fresh, there's a higher value contribution that you can create. As you get old, you get packaged and you get sold at a much more discount to data clearinghouse. So I think this may not be the best analogy, but I used this analogy in one of my council meetings at my last meeting with the President Hollande, where I was advising him on the strategic council side. And basically I said, I think that the economy we're in, the Silicon Valley is all about this window. And there's a window you have to hit. And I think it applies as well in data. And when you miss the window, your value is proportionally going to go down. So hitting that right window, the right value is something that we really have to think about. And that's an opportunity that we all can create. So we all know that oil has been a big driver of our economy in 20th century. And much of that create an ecosystem of from drilling all the way to production, transportation, refinery, and distribution of that to users. And all of us got benefit of driven by this new economy in over 100 years ago. But now I think the data economy could have some parallel economic implication to where we are. So trying to do a parallel may not be the exact parallelism, but I think there is some elements of the size, the scale, the globalness, and potential implication to where we are going. And it's data generation that's really critical. Much of that is driven by sensors and others, and then how you curate them, and then how you connect to other platforms so that you can make bigger data that makes sense, and then getting an insight out of this information that can then present or analyze and advise whatever the implication that you have. So assuming this is the right kind of analogy, and I think you can have a debate all day on this thing, but that's one approach that I took. Assuming this, and then I looked at what are the economic sides of the companies 10 years ago that was in oil economy versus data economy. So if you look at 10 years ago, 5 out of top 10 largest companies in the world are oil companies. And today, if you look at 10 years later, 7 out of top 10 is really platform and data companies. Drastic change. And this change really crossed over not too long ago. In fact, it only happened 4 years ago. Around 2013, the oil economy stayed flat about $1 trillion valuation when you combine top 5 companies. But when you look at the 5 platform companies, it becomes $3 trillion. So clearly, the value of data and the way the data is being used and created is having a much bigger implication. I would imagine if you go back to, and I didn't do this, 100 years ago when oil companies are coming out, and then looking at more traditional shipping companies and other companies, or railroad companies, I bet you have probably very similar kind of projections that come out of nowhere and then surpassing the incumbency that have been dominating for hundreds of years. So we think that there are tremendous opportunities in a lot of what we do, and IoT is one example of that. And when we say IoT, we're not talking about just some smart home. We're really looking at vertical markets, whether it is a smart factories, whether it is a smart health, whether it is autonomous driving. These are all not possible without having sensor data, along with connected intelligence, and then being able to provide insight on where you are and how you're doing, and then being able to provide an advice. That value is being created right in front of us because this industry is not here yet. There's no company that are making money out of digital health today. But I am totally convinced in 10 years, we're going to have some huge companies by using sensors, mobile phones, and cloud that can be able to help us to live better through having preventive health, basically monitoring our gene information and giving better advice. All those things are, I think, very doable. I think autonomous driving or vehicles, a lot of us talk about this. Already, level 2, the earlier stage of the safety is already there. And I think you will see more and more sensors are going in. It's going to help us to drive better. In fact, I drive Tesla. My wife tells me that she gets more comfortable when I put auto mode in highway than me driving. And I was thinking, why is that? And clearly, it's a lot to do with the fact Tesla seems to be right in the center of the road compared to me going back and forth. I think the other thing is that it keeps constant distance with the car in front of you as you set up either 5 lanes or 6 lanes. Just two couple simple things alone is already helping are more comfortable than me driving. Now, of course, autonomous mode isn't quite here yet. In fact, Ricky Hudi, who was the CTO of Audi, who really drove a lot of autonomous driving, talk of some of the experience later, so I will save that. The point is, though, there's a lot of data. 4 terabytes of data could come out of a car. So it has a huge implication to compute, network, connectivity, and storage. And all those things have to work it out and in harmonious way to make it work in a safe environment. So clearly, we're in a new next wave of innovation. Many of us, including me, I started my career 30 years ago at Intel, and that was more personal computer revolution that are happening. I don't think the guys in mini computers saw it coming. And just like that mobile era, and really Steve Jobs gets kudos for driving smartphones, and the Samsung followed, and now none of us can function without smartphones. In fact, we live with smartphones. In fact, if you ask average users how many times you are using your phone, I'm sure you guys can guess 160 times is average usage per day in terms of looking at your smartphones. So, we are in that era. Now, data is everywhere. So these are going to be maybe less obvious, but maybe it's more pervasive. It's going to be everywhere. So I'll give you some example of that. And an obvious example is how many of you took Uber or Lyft today? Raise hand, please. Quite a bit of you. That could not happen with a smartphone. Also sensors that are in there, right? GPS, knowing exactly where you are. And sensors that are helping you to locate and helping you to communicate. So these things are going to only get better. There are 11 sensors today in the phones, and there will be more. And then I think that what I'm really excited about is where it's going. I really think that not only the Uber app helping us to run and utilizing unused capacity better, I mean, that's great. But what if we can help us to learn about our biomarkers, learn about our rhythms, and giving you an advice around some early warning system that can give you a diagnostics way before you have to see a doctor because you have some kind of AFib event in your heart rate and things like that. So to me, where we are going is really exciting, and I'll give you some examples of what's already happening here. This is where data and biology are coming together. And we know often we learn a lot of what we do from biology, parallel computing, as well as some of the concepts around the DNA sequencing. All those things are actually using what we learned in biology, that IT, that are influencing also the biology. So 1 bottle of blood that can give you a lot about our information can be able to see your markers, can give you information about some of other data that are needed for processing, and assuming that all of us get 1 bottle of blood that are being looked at, that's 8 zettabytes of data. But what's important is that we can prevent the late stage issues, and you can bring it back to early stage. In the process, we can reduce the what I call survival rate to 90%. So in other words, you can have a much better survival rates in your experience. So because of all these trends that are going on, we are really interested in investing in the area of digital health, smart machines, Internet of Things, also infrastructure that are driving it. So you can see this number of companies we have invested in the last several years, trying to create data economy and enablers, sensors, as well as algorithms and insights that can be able to help us to really impact the world, the way we live. And so our goal is not just something faster, cheaper that matters too, but it also can impact our lives. And that is the main goal of our large investment. And I mentioned about car as well, as we acquired Harman, which is a tier 1 company that integrates a number of technologies and deliver to changing automotive experience. In fact, if you're driving many of German company cars, BMW, Audi, or Benz, you're probably using Harman products today. And I think what I'm excited about is not only just the center of the infotainment, but being able to connect with the connectivity, being able to give you a whole new display experience, and also being able to then incorporate ADAS capabilities to give you even better experience in long term is what we are looking at. Assuming that happens, you can imagine amount of data that goes in. The 500 gigabyte of data today will become 50 terabytes of data that are going to be in your cars. That is like data centers that are in your individual cars. And Ricky will talk more about that, what the implication is, but I think we're really excited about data implication and how we can be able to drive better and really save lives. There are over 1.3 million people that are fatality rates because of the car accidents. So if you can imagine reducing some of that will be an awesome experience. So to do that, we are investing number of companies in this market space by creating an open platform. So we already have done number of sensor companies. We have done with a number of the software companies, middleware companies, safety companies to enable it. But obviously, this whole area is still very new. Nobody can, I believe, do it alone because this is too big, too vast. So we need to work together in an open platform, just like what happened in 1980s for personal computer. But PC to happen, to really the revolution to happen, their whole architecture have opened it up. And other people joined. When you joined, you can accelerate the pace of innovation. You can bring new ideas. And in turn, it became better and better and better. And I think same thing could happen here as well. We got a whole new sensors. You need to simulate it. And then you need to be able to connect those. And then you need to work with the maps and softwares to make sure these things are working together. Nobody owns all these passes. We have to work together as one to create a solution here. To do that, we created an automotive innovation fund. I did that 2 weeks ago in Frankfurt to stimulate number of investment in this area. So this is an example of going vertical because some of these investments are not horizontal, but more vertical space. So if you netted out our investment theme, you will see that early stage acceleration, they can really try to change the world in terms of new architecture. So I think that you're going to hear from our speakers today. As an example, would be Pradeep will talk about how he want to change the whole data center architecture or the changing the whole AI acceleration with a new architecture by GrabCore. So these are some examples of the kind of companies that are going to talk about that. And we're happy to be a sponsor of that investment as well. But also creating a venture that can be able to then use multiple stages over the multiple life cycle. And then having a vertical fund means we can actually go in much bigger amount so that we can be able to write a check for $100 million or $50 million so that we can be able to create more difficult stage of the integration happen. So example of T2 Tech would be closer to $100 million check we wrote to enable the relationship, to enable the safety side of software that Samsung didn't have. We didn't have an experience. So we integrate this and then be able to go moving forward. So data economy, there are some challenges though. It's exciting, but there are some challenges we have to overcome. And I think that some of them you already know. Part of that is really about data policies. Who owns data? I think this is still going to be continuing to be a big issue. And there are many other policy issues. Man and machine. Is it man versus machine? Is it machine ahead of man? Who is going to make decision in a very difficult circumstance, particularly autonomous driving? These are all the kind of things we are not quite there yet. We have to figure out who's making that decision. Will make a lot about implication to who lives and who survives. Technical issues will continue, but I'm actually less concerned about technical issues. I believe that we can overcome a lot of these challenges over time. But also the other important thing is maybe partnerships. Without partnerships, we're going to have a fragmentation of architecture, fragmentation of platform. In the process, data may not be interchangeable. Like what's going on with the medical field today, it is very clumsy. And our data is not very transportable. It's not helping us to live and help our patients better by having an integrated data management system. So these are some examples of the issues that we have to deal with, but also there's geofencing issues, right? Every geography are trying to protect certain data and for the good reasons, but also it creates a fragmentation in the market as well. So I am really excited that we have speakers that can address these issues that I outlined. And I am looking forward to having you joining us. And I believe that together we can make some great progress on this. Thank you.